This is Gemara Yevamos Daf Sadi Zayin. All the learning should bring an incredible schoshidach for your Yisrael Chaim and Devar Tamasiva Basarach Shalom and Levi Zava Oifik Ben Teli Shema Ben Chaya will mute this Basima Malka as well as Chesru Shlema Shaliyas and your Veda Shmo Ben Tilan Avzal Zim Bechles and Cham Basriva Sara Bluma Bas Middle Chaim Shishum and Malka which Avik Shechana Lalei Basaradina which Avik Shechana Besoich Sha'ar Chali Yisrael. We're holding on the bottom of Sadi Zayin, not the bottom, excuse me. We're holding towards the top of Sadi Zayin Amar Aleph. We're about 12 lines down at the two dots. And the Gemara begins by quoting the Mishnah that said, Echad ben Teishanim v'chulu. The Mishnah said that whether one is 9 years old, which has been the point of discussion, Yibum in relation to a Katan, or the Mishnah continued whether one is 20 years old, but he didn't bring Shtei Sayers. So what's clear from the Mishnah is that one who does not have Shtei Sayers has the din of a katan. Asks the Gemara on this din, V'reminu, I'll ask you a contradiction, and this is a Gemara which we've seen prior. Ben Esrim Shana Shaloevi Shtei Sayers, says the Brisa, a 20-year-old that did not bring Shtei Sayers. So what would the Mishnah continue the statement? The Mishnah would continue the statement that if it didn't bring Shtei Sayers, it's a din of a katan, and you have to wait. But what does the Brisa say? Yavi Raya Shu Ben Esrim, bring a proof that you're 20 years old. V'u Asaris, and this is the din of Asaris, and therefore Lo Chaylet Lo Miyabim, and therefore there's no din of Yibam or Chalit. So as we've spoken at length, because Asra is one who cannot have children, one who does not physically mature, does not do Yibam or Chalitza, because they cannot reach the purpose of Yibam and Chalitza, which is to have children. Continues the Brisa. If there's a girl who's 20 years old, does not bring Shtei Sayers, again, so ask the Gemara, what do we see? We see that once one is 20 years old, they have a din of an adult, they have a din of a sris, and that's a steer to our Mishnah. Because our Mishnah learned that the 20-year-old that didn't bring Shtei Sayers has the din of a katan. Answers the Gemara, we learned on this, as we've spoken at length, that Brisa was referring to specifically when they had the simanim of a sris, just to remind ourselves, this was one who doesn't have a deep voice, and other woman-like or child-like characteristics, that was a sris. So when that Mishnah, that Brisa said as din of a sris, was because it has the simanim of a sris, so it's not a contradiction to our Mishnah. Amar Rava comments, it's a proof, the Mishnah said, so it works out beautifully, Shmamina, a beautiful raya. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Let's say they don't have a simanim of a sris. So until what age do we have to wait, and do we consider them a katan like our Mishnah taught us? Explains the Gemara, you have to wait the majority of the years, which the simple explanation is 35. We know that the base age is going to be 70. The majority of 70 is going to be 36 years old. When one who is of such an age, a 20-year-old plus, that didn't bring Shtei Sayers, came in front of Rava, what would Rava say? Rava would say, if the person was very thin, Amrlu, you would say, Zilav Ruah, go and gain some weight. Ibari, and if he was very thick, he was heavy, Amrlu, Zilach Shua, go on a diet. Why? The Hanu Simanim, because the Simanim of Gadlos, the Shtei Sayers, Simanim dinatri machas kechishusa. Sometimes they fall out due to one being too thin. Sometimes they fall out when one being too heavy. So Rava would say, go and ascertain, go and do something, make yourself healthy in order to determine if you really would get Shtei Sayers. We should do an incredible chazara on this 10th parak of Yevamos. Baruch Hashem, as we begin the 11th parak, this is really the home stretch, the final, basically, month, Baruch Hashem, of this absolutely fabulous and fascinating Masechta. Yes, it's been a bit difficult at times, but as we've always learned, more we push through day by day, eventually we get there. So says the Mishnah on the new parak, Noisin al ha'anusa the al ha'mefuta. Says the Mishnah, one is allowed to marry a relative of one that he was a ma'anes, that he was mefata. Oines means rape, it means forceful relations. Mefata means seduction. So if a man seduces or rapes a girl, he's allowed to marry her relatives. Oines mefata ala nesua. Continues the Mishnah, but one that indeed does such, of course, is chayif. If one is married, if one is ma'anis or mefata, the relative of his married wife, his chayiv is not allowed. Continues the Mishnah, if one's father was ma'anis or mefata a girl, he's allowed to marry. The son is allowed to marry such a woman. Anuzas bino, mafutas bino. And similarly, the son, if one's son is ma'anis or mefata a woman, the father is allowed to marry. Rav Yehuda oiser b'anusas av mafutas avim. Says Rav Yehuda, no, if one's father is over such an Avera, the son is not allowed to marry that woman. So says the Gemara, let's start off with the first din of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said if someone is over an Avera, if someone is Ma'anes or Mefata, a girl, he's still allowed to marry her relatives. Says the Gemara in the bottom of Sadizayin Amaral Tanina Luha, the Tanu Rabbanan, we learned the following brisa. Anas isha mutter lisa bita. If one is ma'anes, he forcefully has relations with a woman, he's allowed to marry her daughter, concurring with the din of the Mishnah, almost mimicking perfectly the din of the Mishnah. One is allowed to marry the relatives of one who one is forcefully with. Nosa isha. But if one marries a woman, then also Lisa Bita, you're not allowed to marry the daughter. So the din that one is not allowed to marry the relative of his wife is specifically a wife. Doesn't mean the relative of one that one sleeps with, but rather the relative of a wife. Asks the Gemara, Rabbi Ramini will ask you a contradiction. Hanitan mina isha. If one is warned, if there are rumors about a man being together with a specific woman, also he's forbidden to whom? Be'ima, the woman's mother, Be'bita, the woman's daughter, Ba'achais, the woman's sister. So ask the Gemara, you're telling me if he actually had relations, he's mutter to marry the relatives? We see in a brisa, the mere rumor makes one forbidden to the relatives. Explains the Gemara, no, that's a din midrabanan. It's only a din derabanan. But ask the Gemara further, wait, Surah midrabanan. You're telling me that Chazal created Isra Rabbanan, and yet Tani Nisuan lechatchila, and yet you're teaching me that lechatchila you could go and marry such? That makes no sense. Explains the Gemara, Kitran mas nisan la'achar misa. When did the Mishnah say they let him marry the relative? That was la'achar misa. After the woman dies, that one raped or seduces, then he's allowed to marry the relative. When the Brisa said it is forbidden, it is while that woman is alive. Asks the Gemara now on this din. So we reconcile the contradiction. But now says the Gemara, Benani Mili, where do we know this din from? Explains the Gemara, the Tanu Rabban, Bekula Nemar Shchiva, Bekanemar Kicha. By all Isurim, the relationships which are forbidden, what does it say? Shchiva, lying, sleeping. What does it say over here about the Isser to marry a relative? It says Kicha, marriage. To teach you, Derech Leikuchen Asra Taira, that the Isser, the prohibition, is when there is a marriage, not specifically if one is together with a woman. Amar le Rababla Abaya, 10 lines from the wide line, tell me when it comes to one sister, the Chsif, one that takes his sister, Bas Aviv, the daughter of his father, or Bas Ima, the daughter of his mother. Are you telling me that any time the Torah writes about a forbidden relationship, it's only marriage? One could go and sleep with his sister? Of course not. So Amar le Rabbi responds, Lekuchen ksivi b'Torah stam. The Torah used the word lekuchen, taking. Harai lekicha lekicha, harai l'shchiva l'shchiva. Now we use the context to decide what it refers to. So when it comes to a stam relation with a sister, of course it refers to shchiva. But when it comes to marrying the relative, then it's only going to refer to one who one married the relative, not one who was just together with such a relative. Rava says a different makar, a different source from the Mishnah. Anas isha motalisa bita mehacha from here. It says you should not reveal the erva, the nakedness of one's daughter or one's granddaughter. Her granddaughter. Gali, one is yes allowed to reveal such a erva. But no, uksiv ervas isha bita loisei galei as basmin of as bas bita loisei kach. So we have these two psukim that we're not sure what they're teaching us. Kan be'oinsin, kan be'nisuin. So we're learning out very clearly when there's an isuin, then one's not allowed to marry and be together with the relative. But when it's just oinsin, then one is yes allowed to be married to the relative. Ask the Gemara ipachana. How do you know? How do you know when there's a marriage you can't marry the relative of that girl? But if there's just the relations, then you could. Explains the Gemara, Arayas she'er ksivbu, b'nisuin ika she'er, ba'insin leka she'er. When it comes to arayas, when it comes to the prohibition, the transgression, the iser of being together with a relative, it says she'er. She'er, a relationship, is only created via a marriage. And that's the source that the iser is specifically when one marries a woman, then he's not allowed to marry their relative. But if one is just sleeping with a woman, then he's yes allowed to marry their relative. So in the Mishnah we had a shita called Rabbi Yehuda, the conclusion of the Mishnah, who taught us that one is aser to the anus and the mafuta, the girl that one's father sleeps with. That is Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. So says the Gemara in the last medium-sized line, Rabbi Yehuda Eiser Banusas Aviv. Amar Rav Gidel Amar Rav, my time with Rabbi Yehuda. Where did Rabbi Yehuda get his din? Says in the Torah, Lo Yikach as Ishes Aviv Lo Yigali Kanaf Aviv. One should not take the wife of his father, nor reveal the kanaf, the nakedness of his father. Kanaf Shero Aviv Lo Yigale. Any woman that the father is with, you cannot be with. And from here, says Rabbi Yehuda, if one's father is with a girl, you're not allowed to be with her afterwards. Asks the Gemara in the second one line, how do you know the pasuk is talking about anusa, that the father sleeps forcefully with her? It says above in the psukim, it says previously in the psukim that one should give that is together with a girl 50 silver coins. So says Rabbi Yehuda, the juxtaposition of the two psukim teach us that a girl that the father is ma'anes, the son cannot be with. Ask the Gemara of Rabbanan. And the first sheet of the Tanakhama of our Mishnah that clearly disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda, and the Tanakhama that holds that one is yes allowed to be with the anus, the mafut of one's father. He explains, if the psukim were mamish next door to each other, you'd be right. But they weren't right next door to each other. We use this pasuk for a different din. These are dinim, drashas, that we're really going to deal with in about a month's time when we get to Masechus Ksubis. The pasuk is teaching us a different din. It's not teaching us the din if one's father is ma'anis and marfata a girl. No, says Rabban. You know what it's teaching us? He's teaching us the din that if one's father is awaiting gibum, one's father's brother was nifter, so one's father's brother's wife is awaiting gibum, that woman one is not allowed to be together with. Asks the Gemara 2 lines on the end of the Amid, my kanav aviv. It doesn't mean the kanaf, the nakedness that one's father was with. It means roi, it means this girl that is awaiting yibum. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Who are we referring to? The father's brother's wife. Ask the Gemara, why are you telling me that the issue over here is that it's because it's ra'oi to the father? It's one's aunt. You're not allowed to be together with your own aunt. Explains the Gemara, you're right. And it just teaches us that there's a second lav. There's another problem being together with this girl. This woman is waiting ibum. Any woman awaiting ibum is not allowed to marry anyone else. That's the Isser lav of Yivam L'Shuk. Says Gemara, you're right. Lav or love Shloish Lavim. Teretz number 1. V'ibay same another teretz la'achar misa. Says the Gemara, you know what it's referring to? It's referring to after the death of the father. Therefore, the Isser of Yevamos falls away. And therefore, we need a pasuk teach me it's still forbidden. Says the Gemara, as we turn over to Sadi Zayin Amud Beis, a pretty interesting Gemara, which we're really just going to scratch the surface. The Gemara is going to go through a bunch of statements, almost like brain teasers, and the Gemara is going to create the case that fits with each brain teaser. Let's go. Says the Gemara, Ach me'av. How do you have a case that you have a paternal brother? V'lo you have a paternal brother, not a maternal brother, and that same person is Vubayla De'im, is the mother's husband. Va'ana, and I is Brata Dantate, is the wife's daughter. So we have a person that's a paternal, not a maternal brother. So it's only coming from the father, it's not coming from the mother. And that same person is whom? The mother's husband, which is very funny. we're talking about someone's brother who's also the mother's husband, sounds like almost like the father, and I'm the wife's daughter. What does this mean? Amar Rabbi Bar Chama, the like Rav Yehuda de Masis, this does not fit Rav Yehuda of our Mishnah. Continues the Gemara. Achu ubariu. How do we have a case that a woman says he's my brother, ubariu, and he's my son? The same person is my brother and my son. Achte ana. I am the sister of this child, the Dahai Darina Akasvei, who I'm carrying. So she's saying the child I'm carrying, I'm the child's sister, and he is my brother and he is my son. So again, each one of these things is very complicated to wrap your brain around. But says the Gemara, you know what the case is? Mishkachas la be'akom abal bita. You have a guy that is together with his own daughter. So since he's together with his own daughter and had a son by her, so now you realize that his own son, you have a double relationship over here, because his own daughter, who's his wife, because this guy slept with his daughter and then had a son, and that is the reason why the child is a son and a brother. And again, we're not going to explain each and every one. This is a very simple one to just wrap our brain around, and the rest, everyone just has to think about it on their own. Continues the Gemara, Shalom Alecha, peace is to you, Bri, my son. Bas achteich, I am your sister's daughter. So the same son is a sister's daughter. Explains the Gemara. We have a guy, and of course, anytime it's a forbidden incestual relationship, we're going with goyim. A guy that is together with his daughter's daughter, and then had a son. So therefore, this woman is both the child's mother and as well as the paternal sister's daughter. Continues the Gemara. Men who draw water with a pail, libol b'chuseser peter. Let a riddle fall amongst you. So men that draw water with a pail, here is a riddle for you. The child that I carry, who bar, is my son. Va'ana bras achvua. And I am my brother's daughter. So this is my son and I'm my brother's daughter. What's the case? You have a guy that's together with his granddaughter, with his son's daughter, and they had a son. So she is the child's mother, and as well the paternal brother's daughter. Another riddle. Baya, whoa. Me'ach v'hu av, because of my brother, who is my father. V'hu bal, who is my husband. This is getting wild. V'hu bar bal, and it's my husband's son. V'hu bailo de'eb, and it's my mother's husband. V'ana brata disei, and I am his wife's daughter. V'lo yoiv pita, and he doesn't give bread l'achuya yasme to his orphaned brothers. V'ni brate, of his own daughter's children. So how is this crazy case possible? Says the Gemara on the first wide line, Mishkachla ba'akmal ba'al imai. We have a guy that is together with his own mother. And he has a daughter. So now he's both this girl's father and as well brother. The story doesn't end here. And then he went to and then he slept with that daughter, which if you're doing the math and the age gaps over here, it gets pretty wild. Now he becomes the husband, quote unquote, of this girl. And then this grandfather, the guy's father, had relations with her, and also had more kids. And that is how the case is going to be, this whole wild case. And finally, we're going to conclude 3 lines into the wild lines. Ana va'at achi, you and I are siblings. Ana va'avuch achi, you and your father and I are siblings. Ana v'imech achi, your mother and I are siblings. How is this possible? We have a guy again that's with her mother, his mother. And he had 2 daughters. And after sleeping with his mother and having 2 children, he goes and he sleeps with his daughter. And has a son. So the mother's sister calls to him and speaks to him like this. And the final puzzle is, you and I are children of Achi, of siblings. You and I are the children of siblings. Your mother and I are the children of siblings. How is this all possible? So says the Gemara, this case could be beheter. We don't have to have goyim sleeping with their mother and their daughter, etc. What's the case? Kegoin, for example, Reuven Reuben has two daughters. We have three brothers, Reuben, Shimon, and Levi, and Reuben himself has two daughters. Vasa Shimon, Benasa Chada. Shimon marries one of his brother's daughters, which is fine, his niece, Minayu. Vasa Bar Levi, Vinasav Minayu. And then the grandson of Levi's son, so Shimon marries the daughter, and then Levi's son, one generation down, goes and marries the other one. But Kamer braid the Shimon Levar braid the Levi. And who's talking when he's saying that we're siblings, the siblings of mothers and fathers? Who's talking is Shimon's son, is talking to Levi's grandson. And these are all these interesting brain teasers, etc. And now we'll continue by beginning the next Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, now we go into the dinam of Yibum and the dinam of Chalitza with regard to Geirim, Geirus. Says the Mishnah, Ha-Geirish and his Geir. We have a girl who becomes a Ger, Boneho Ima, together with her son. So she becomes a Geiris, together with her son. And then that son gets married and dies without children. The brothers of that son do not do chalitza nor yibum, because of course we know ger shenis gayer kikatan shenay ladami, that any ger that any person becomes a ger is unrelated to everyone else. As Rashi quotes, "V'zerma susin zermasan." There's no relationship between siblings of gerim, and therefore this kid who dies without children, he has no brother to do yibum. Continues the Mishnah, "Afilu hayrasa shel Ruvain shalei b'kedusha." Even if the Hirasa shall Rishon, Shalai B'Kedusha, even if the first son's conception was Shalai B'Kedusha, meaning while the mother was a guy, V'leidasa B'Kedusha, and the baby was born after the mother becomes a Yid. But V'Hasheni, but the second son, Hirasa Leidasa B'Kedusha, was fully fledged Yid, still they're not related, because since the first son was conceived while his mother was a guy, he will be unrelated to any other siblings, even born from the same mother. Says the Gemara, B'nei Yudin Amasa Ishtachar Shara Lehu Rav Acha Bar Yaakov Leminzi Nashil Adadi. The children of Yudin, the main servant, were freed. They became Yidden. And what happened? Rav Acha Bar Yaakov allowed them to marry each other's wives. Because basically once they became freed, they became full-fledged Jews. And what happened at that point was, they're no longer related to anyone, as Rashi points out. As we spoke out, that when the ger becomes a ger, they're completely unrelated, so they can go and marry each other's wives. Amar le Rava, v'har Rav Sheshes asar. Rav Sheshes said you're not allowed to. So Amar le Rav Acha responds, Hu asar v'no sharina. I hold it is mutter. So explains the Gemara, what exactly is this machloikas between Rava and Rav Sheshes? Mina avoloi mina Rav Acha Bar Yaakov and Rav Sheshes, Mina avoloi mina whether the brothers are the same father but not the same mother, then of course there's no relationship. Mina when they're brothers from the father, not from the mother, not from the father, then it's forbidden. There is a relationship. They call him the kids of that father. For Rav Sheshes Karilu Nami Blainis says Rav Sheshes, no, they also call the name of the mother, and therefore they are not considered to be related. Vikid Yamri, another way of learning the previous Machloikas, Palag Rav Acha Bar Yaakov Afilu Ba'achim and Aim, he even argues in the brothers from the mother, my taima, Gershon is Gari Kodan Shanoilad, Tami. Continues the Gemara, Kashon Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, Tanan. We learned in our Mishnah, Hagi Yoirish and this guy, Rabbanel Yima Lachol Tulam Yamim, my taima. What's the reason no chalitza or yibum? La mishom da asira. Is it not because they're forbidden? So according to Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, you're allowed to do whatever you want. So our Mishnah seemingly is a kasha on Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. Explains the Gemara, Loi, that's not what the Mishnah means. What the Mishnah means is no chalitza, no yibum. There ain't no b'toiras chalitza v'yibum. That is not b'toiras. They're nothing. They're unrelated entirely. And therefore, just like Rav Acha Bar Yaakov said, V'sharya Alma. Go marry whoever you want. Ask the Gemara. Venu Nami Sharu, and they themselves are also mutter. But I asked the Gemara a technical kasha of Aktani Afilu. The Mishnah said Afilu. So if you're telling me that the Mishnah teaches an Isser, it's very good. The first case, the first son was conceived while they were a guy and then born as a yid. And the Mishnah is teaching me they didn't have two different mothers. It's still forbidden. What's that filu in the Mishnah? Explains the Gemara. Both of the Leidas, they're both born to a mother who's a yid. It's still forbidden. You know why? Because they might confuse it with a yid who has regular paternal brothers, and therefore that is the problem. Shari, that was the Havamina of the Chiddush is that's still going to be mutter. Says the Gemara, there's other way of learning the Gemara. That what the following of Rav Achar Yaakov is logical. Why think Tanu Afilu? Yeah, Rish Lama Sharu and Tanu Afilu. The Avagav the Riley does big dusha. Does not be Savilu Achi Sharu. Yamir Asiri Maya Afilu. The Avagav the Rishon Rosh big dusha. Does big dusha. Sheni Rosh does big dusha. The Chseima is Tami Afilu Achi Asiri, and that's going to be the unique Chiddush of the Mishnah. And we're going to pick it up from the Tashema, the next Raisa, and tomorrow's Shir B'Siyato.